session. And we will start with Mark Zanfri talking about failing to generalize Cox ID.
Okay, that's great.
Hi everyone. So this will be talking about my failed attempts to generalize the Cox ID crypto system. So let's first remind ourselves what IDE is. So in identity-based encryption, basically everyone's public key is just going to be their identity. So there's some public parameters that everyone uses, and to encrypt, Bob wants to encrypt a message to Alice, and he just uses the public parameters, Alice's name, and sends the message. Meanwhile, Alice got a secret key from some trusted authority that she can use to decrypt. So what we're going to be talking about today is one of the first IDE systems, Cox ID, came out around the same time as the Bonnet-Franklin IDE from pairings. And while pairings went on to become this major field within cryptography, the underlying mathematics of Cox ID have not been used so much. So my goal in this work was to see if I could do something interesting. Okay, so what is Cox ID? So the public parameters are going to be an RSA modulus n, product of two order primes. Alice's secret key is going to be the square root of the hash, a square root of the hash of her identity, so some public hash function. The message is going to be a bit, which we'll encode as -1. And to encrypt, what Bob is going to do is he's going to hash Alice's identity. And he's also going to choose this value t, and the ciphertext is going to be 4t squared plus the hash of Alice's identity divided by 4t. Cox's original description, the factors of 4 weren't there, but I kind of changed things to make things a little more consistent throughout the talk. And this t is chosen so that the Jacobi symbol of t mod n is equal to m. So the Jacobi symbol is some map from all of the elements of Zn into -1,1, or technically if you're not coprime to n, it could also be 0, but we're not worried about that case. So this is how encryption works, and to decrypt, what Alice does is she just computes, she takes her x, that's the square root of the hash of Alice, and just computes c plus x, which c is the ciphertext, and computes the Jacobi symbol mod n. Okay, so I'll just briefly describe why this works. Okay, so c plus x, we just plug in what c is, so 4t squared plus h Alice, those are 4t. Plus x. And by rearranging things and using the fact that x is a square root of h of Alice, we can actually write c plus x as t plus x over 2, that whole thing squared over t. All right, so now when we compute the Jacobi symbol of c plus x mod n, the Jacobi symbol is homomorphic, so we can take all of the factors of c plus x, so the t plus x over 2. That comes out as one factor, and there's actually 2 of those factors. And then there's a t that also comes out. And now this, the Jacobi symbol, remember, maps to -1,1, so everything squared becomes 1. So this term here goes away, and taking the inverse of the thing, and so we get that. Okay. Okay, so this is Cox ID. And this will be important as we go on. We can think of Cox ID as what it's doing is it allows anyone to encrypt to polynomials that are quadratic. So what Bob is doing is encrypting to the polynomial x squared minus h of Alice, such that anyone with a root of that polynomial can decrypt. And this readily generalizes to any quadratic polynomial. So with Cox ID, you can encrypt to any quadratic polynomial, such that anyone with any root of that quadratic polynomial can decrypt. Okay, so what is our goal today? Our goal is to try to generalize this. So we are going to want to have secret keys rather than being square roots to be cube roots, fifth roots, whatever. Something more than just the square roots. Don't know what encryption is going to look like, but we still want decryption to have this nice form where you just take the ciphertext, you add your secret key, and then you compute the Jacobi symbol. So this is our goal. And more generally, we would want to encrypt to roots of arbitrary degree k polynomials, and I'm just choosing the particular set of polynomials that are x to the k minus h of s. Okay, so why am I interested in encrypting to higher order roots? Well, first, if you could actually do this in full generality, if you could encrypt to arbitrary polynomials, this would give you a broadcast encryption scheme. So let's say I want to encrypt to Alice, Bob, and Charlie. What I do is I just create this polynomial, 8x squared minus h of Alice times x squared minus h of Bob, and so forth. And now Alice, Bob, and Charlie all have square roots, or sorry, all have roots of this polynomial, so they can all decrypt. And more generally, if you could encrypt to arbitrary polynomials, you would get the ability to encrypt to arbitrary sets of users. And what this gives you is a broadcast encryption scheme where the ciphertext, again, assuming the ciphertext is just one component mod n, and the encryption is C plus X Jacobi symbol, this gives you a very compact way to encrypt to arbitrary sets of users. This is a famous rule in cryptography, broadcast encryption, and we have solutions from pairings with short ciphertext, and also other fancy tools like witness encryption and obfuscation. But it'd be really exciting if we could get a solution from this kind of mathematics. Another, maybe less exciting, but I still think interesting consequence is that for Cox IDE, you actually have to encrypt your message twice, and this is for a subtle reason. So remember that the secret keys are square roots of the hash of your identity. Well, we actually don't know how to obliviously hash into the set of quadratic residues mod n. So if you just hash Alice's name, you might get a quadratic residue, you might not. About half of the elements will be quadratic residues. And if you don't get a quadratic residue, then Alice can't decrypt, right? Because there's just no secret key. So basically, you have to set the scheme up such that there's actually two hashes, one of which will have a square root, and that means you have to encrypt using two ciphertexts. But if you, say, had a scheme for just even cube roots, for an appropriate choice of n, all elements in n might have, Zn might have cube roots, and therefore you could hope to actually, make sure that everybody has these, you don't need to do this trick where you encrypt twice. You can just encrypt once, everyone has a secret key that allows them to do that. And then finally, I just think generally that, the structure of this scheme Cox scheme is very interesting, and it's kind of a shame that it hasn't been useful in more areas of cryptography. Okay, so before getting on into our work, I do want to mention that there has been some work actually looking at Cox IDE and various generalizations, and the one that's most relevant is this work by Bonnet et al. And they generalize it, but in a somewhat analogous way, but a different way. So the way that they generalize it, they actually do set the secret keys to be kth roots of your hash for arbitrary k. They changed the message space, and that's what actually their goal was. They wanted to expand the message space because Cox IDE, you only can encrypt one bit at a time. They wanted to see if you could encrypt more information. So they expanded the message space. And decryption, now instead of using the Jacobi symbol, uses a generalization called the kth power residue symbol. But the limitation of their scheme is that the decryption process, actually, you compute a whole polynomial in your secret key and compute the residue symbol of that polynomial. And you actually have to send this whole polynomial as part of the ciphertext. So the ciphertext ends up actually being huge, and you don't end up getting the compression. So remember, we wanted to have just a linear polynomial, the C plus X, rather than a general polynomial C of X, where in their case, the polynomial is all the way up to degree K minus 1. Okay, so the starting point of this work is, by fiddling around with things, was able to find a solution, correct solution for cube roots. And it's a little more complicated, but it looks kind of similar to Cox IDE. So your secret key is a cube root of a mod n. And now to encrypt, we compute this t value. The t is a little different. The t is going to be such that t cubed plus a Jacobi symbol is equal to m, rather than just Jacobi symbol is equal to m, but fine. And now we have this expression up here for what the ciphertext is going to be. It's a function of t and the hash of Alice's identity. Okay, So we have a correct scheme. And here's decryption. I won't go through all the details, but you can kind of do the same thing you do with Cox IDE. You write C plus X, you expand it out using the fact that X is a cube root of A, which I'm using a shorthand for the hash of Alice's identity. And you can kind of factor things, and all your factors end up disappearing because, again, we have a homomorphism that's 52. And so you're left with T cubed plus A Jacobi symbol, and we chose T exactly to have that Jacobi symbol. Okay, so we have a correct scheme. So our dream theorem is, can we generalize this? Can we get a secure generalization of Cox IDE to encrypt to any polynomial and thereby get all these exciting applications? And as a proof by example, we have correct protocols for 2 and 3, right? Cox IDE is degree 2, the scheme I just presented is degree 3, and there's a trivial solution for degree 1 as well. So it seems like we're in good shape. Unfortunately, basically proof by example is not a proof. And it actually turns out that there's really fundamental reasons that we can't get what we look for. So this work consists of 2 theorems. The first theorem is that actually we're going to run into trouble with security. So I said we have a correct scheme for degree plus 3, but it turns out it's insecure. And this is a consequence of an even more general theorem. So what we're going to consider is we're going to consider general schemes where we're actually going to allow decryption to be computing power residue symbols like the Boneo work. It could be arbitrary polynomials for the decryption. So remember, we were insisting on C plus X being the polynomial, but it could be arbitrary polynomials derived from the ciphertext. And what we show is that if your secret keys are kth roots of some public value, or more generally, any root of a degree k polynomial, where the degree k polynomial is public. So Cox IDE, the degree 2 polynomial is x squared minus h of Alice, which anyone can compute that polynomial. Our scheme is for cube roots, but so for general k, where k is a degree of the polynomial defining the secret keys. And then E is the power residue symbol we're going to use. If your decryption is some polynomial in your secret key, and then compute the power residue symbol, we say that this is a k comma E scheme. And the theorem, the first main theorem, is that if your k and E are relatively prime, then no matter what k E scheme you give me, the scheme is going to be insecure. Okay, so Cox IDE gets around this because k and E are both 2. And 2 and 2 are obviously not relatively prime. The Boneo generalization has k and E being also the same, so they're not relatively prime. But our scheme is a 3-2 scheme. K is equal to 3 because we're encrypting the cube roots, but E is 2 because we're still using the Jacobi symbol, which is a power residue symbol for the case E equals 2. So this says that our scheme is insecure. Now you might ask, well, okay, fine. I can't have k and E be relatively prime. But maybe I can set k to be a multiple of E or a power of E, or something where we get around the first theorem by setting things to be not relatively prime. And our second theorem is also a no-go theorem of that form that says that while we were able to generalize to degree 3 in terms of a correct scheme for get security, there was no hope of going one step further. We can't even generalize the scheme to degree 4. And more precisely, as long as we're insisting on decryption being this linear function, C plus X, Jacobi symbol, there are no, and there's going to be some requirements as well that I'll mention later. There's going to be no schemes that are even correct. So for degree at least 4. So the only correct schemes are degree 2 and 3. 3 is relatively prime, so it has to be insecure, and so really this says that Cox IDE is the only scheme that is quote natural. Okay, so let's prove these. They're both relatively simple. Okay, so the first theorem. So what I'm going to do is, okay, so we're going to have some supposed KE scheme, where again, K is the degree of the polynomial defining the secret keys, and E is the value used for the E power residue symbol when you're decrypting. So what we're going to do is, so F, recall, is this public polynomial where the roots that can decrypt are all roots of this polynomial. So what we're going to do is we're going to just write this formal polynomial f of alpha 1 times f of alpha 2 all the way up to f of alpha k. And this is just some polynomial in the variables alpha 1 and alpha k. And it's symmetric in the alpha 1 and alpha k. So what this means is we can write any symmetric polynomial as another polynomial in these e sub j's, which are the elementary symmetric polynomials. So each e sub j is some elementary symmetric polynomial in alpha 1 to alpha k, and I can write the whole product of these f's as capital F of these elementary symmetric polynomials. And this is all just based on public information. I don't need any, right, these are all, alphas are just formal variables, we're not using these. Okay, so now let's suppose that these alphas actually were the unknown roots of S. When I say the, I mean a little bit precise because there's basically S is a degree k polynomial. And mono prime, there's only k roots. We're actually working monocomposite, so there's k squared roots, for example. But let's forget that. Let's just assume that, let's just pretend for this talk that there's actually k distinct roots. If we have k distinct roots, then the e sub j are actually you actually can see them in just the coefficients of the polynomial S. Right, the coefficients of the polynomial S up to signs basically actually tell you what the EJ are. And so I can actually compute these elementary symmetric polynomials and therefore compute this capital F state. Right, so I can compute this capital F, which is the product of the F's applied to the unknown roots of S. I don't know what the roots are, but I can compute this product of F applied to the roots. Okay, and now here's how I decrypt. Without knowing nothing but the public information, I compute this value F of these unknown roots, even though I don't know what they are. I can compute this capital F. I compute the e power residue symbol, and then I take the whole thing and I raise it to the k inverse mod e. And now just using the fact that the k power residue symbol, the e power residue symbol is a homomorphism, I can, first I break out f into the little f's, and now I factor it. And now I use the fact that f is the polynomial that you use to decrypt, right? So the e power residue symbol of f alpha I is actually just the message by the supposed correctness of the scheme. So I get k factors of f in here. Each of the alpha i's gives me an m, because that's just how decryption works. And so I get m to the k, and then the whole thing's raised to the k inverse mod e. And since the e power residue symbols live in a group of order e, doing this spins out that. Okay. So that's it. That's the theorem. And the reason I need that k need to be relatively prime is because of this k inverse mod e in the exponent. If k and e were not relatively prime, say they were equal, when I get this m to the k, I'm actually just going to get 1. This is exactly what happened in Cox IBU and the generalization by Bonnet et al. When you try, you can still do this up to the point of raising to the k inverse mod e, but you just get 1, and then you win out. Okay, and it turns out if you kind of, I did things very abstractly, but it turns out if you kind of work through it for the scheme that I presented earlier, for the degree 3 scheme, the decryption is actually really simple. It's just you take whatever the ciphertext is, you cube it, you add hash of Alice, you do the true over symbol, and if you work through the math, you find out that you actually do that. So this is completely insecure. Okay, now let's move on to theorem 2, which says that there's no natural correct scheme for degree greater than 4, or at least 4. And by natural, what I mean is, maybe because I'm a little behind on time, but by natural, what I mean is that all the terms that we're generating are basically rational functions in some underlying randomness. And more concretely, what I want is that if I take C plus some variable x, right, this is what decryption is doing, right? C plus some variable x. what I get is actually I get something that factors, where I get a v. The v is the thing that, when I compute the Jacobi symbol of, I actually get the message, and then I get some other junk that has to be quadratic. So I get this g of x squared. And this equality happens not x to the k minus a, so it's only true when x is actually a solution to the polynomial. All right, so this is some definition of a natural scheme, and what we show through some just kind of manipulating. So we have this equation up here that says that c plus x equals v plus g of x squared mod x to the k minus a, and if you just end up like kind of playing around with it and manipulating it, what you end up finding is you actually get there's an elliptic curve hiding in there. And this elliptic curve, the scheme itself ends up giving you a rational parameterization of the elliptic curve, which means that you can actually, using the kind of variables that are the randomness of your scheme, you can actually, by plugging into all this expression, you can actually kind of trace out the whole elliptic curve. But it turns out that this isn't possible. So elliptic curves have no rational parameterization. There's no rational function that kind of maps underlying randomness to points on the elliptic curve and traces out the whole elliptic curve. This is well known. And so it turns out for degree 4 that this is possible. And that's it for the talk. And some future directions, maybe there's something in between. We said you can't do linear decryption. The Bonnet et al. Scheme says you can do this really high order decryption. But maybe there's something in between where you can get some amount of compactness of your ciphertext while not paying, while actually being, secure our results. And likewise, maybe more than one ciphertext to describe the polynomial that you use to decrypt. All right, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark, for the talk. Are there any questions?
Thanks. This is probably a very elementary question, but if you go back to one of your early slides where you had the three things that you noted about Cox encryption, in point number 2, which was about the quadratic residues,
Yes.
that one, yeah. If you just define your hash function to be, MD5 squared.
Sure.
Don't you just avoid that?
Yes, you do, but this is the key word here. I glossed over that. You want to be able to obliviously hash, because if your hash function was MD5 squared, then everyone knows the square root of Alex's hash, right? Because they can just compute MD5 of Alex.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Yeah. I knew I was missing something, thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Okay, so I don't think you mentioned why you care about linear decryption.
Yeah, good. So in principle, I don't care. The reason that I was kind of focusing on linear decryption is that we want to keep the ciphertext small, and the natural thing to look at is you have one ciphertext component. You could imagine having 2 or 3, but let's just say you want one ciphertext component, and it's somehow describing a polynomial. The natural thing to do is to just have it describe constant polynomial is useless, but to have it describe basically a linear polynomial. If you wanted a higher degree decryption, but with one ciphertext component, you need to somehow, your ciphertext somehow tells you multiple coefficients of this higher degree polynomial. And certainly it opens up the spaces more protocols, but it's also harder to think about. So, focus on linear because it was something that seemed a lot more tangible. And it's also ultimately, I know how to prove barriers for it.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, so if not, let's thank Mark again. Right, so the next talk is also remote.
share her screen.
Hang on.
Hi. I think we can't hear her again.
Oh. There we go.
All right.
And
Can you ask her to test her sound?
Hi.
Hi, can you hear me?
Perfect.
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me too?
Yes, perfect.
Great. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so the next talk is about limitations of quantum sieving-based information set decoding by Lynn Engelbert, Simona Etinsky, and Johanna Neuer, and Lynn will give a talk.
Thank you very much. Hi, my name is Lynn Engelbert, and I'm presenting joint work, as was already said, with Simona Etinsky and Johanna Loyer. All three of us are based in Amsterdam at CWI. I would like to thank the organizers for this event and also for allowing me to present online. And I would also like to thank the reviewers for the very valuable feedback. Our work is titled Limitations of Quantum Sieving-Based Information Set Decoding. And in particular, we're concerned with quantum cryptanalysis of the decoding problem. And the decoding problem underlies most of code-based cryptography, as you may know. And the most efficient generic attacks for this problem are information set decoding algorithms, or ISD. And with generic here, I mean that these attacks hold for any set of parameters instead of for a specific parameter set. Different variants of ISD algorithms exist, and in particular, there are quantum ISD algorithms. Recently, a new variant was introduced by Guo et al., which was ISD using a code sieving subroutine. And this was further improved and generalized by Duca et al. Shortly after. We will refer to the resulting algorithm as sieving-based ISD. And sieving-based ISD performs runtime-wise very close to the classical state of the art, and it also has better time-space trade-offs. And while code sieving is, sieving techniques for code-based cryptanalysis are new, they are abundant in lattice-based cryptanalysis. And in particular, sieving techniques have resulted in the best classical and quantum time complexity for solving the shortest vector problem, SVP. So this raised some natural questions. The first of which is, can we obtain similar quantum speedups for code sieving as those that we observe in lattice sieving? And secondly, how well do quantum analogs of sieving-based ISD perform? And here it's important to emphasize that this first question is really concerned about the code sieving subroutine, and the second one views the overall ISD algorithm itself. And what we showed is that the answer to the first question is yes. So that's nice. There are quantum speedups for code sieving, or nice, depending on how you look at it. And the second question we answered with not so well. So the quantum analogs that we consider, they do not outperform any of the quantum ISD algorithms. And we tried to resolve this issue, but we failed. However, hopefully an insightful failure, which is why we tried to present it here. So let's go into detail. For the decoding problem, I need a notion of codes. So with an NK binary linear code, I refer to a k-dimensional subspace of F2 to the n. And to elements of this code, I will call them code words. Then the decoding problem is defined as follows. So given an NK binary linear code C and an integer W, find a code word that has Hamming weight W. So this absolute value sign here refers to the Hamming weight of a vector. Now some remarks are, first, if I fix n and k, then we can choose W such that there exists a unique solution on average. And this is also known as the unique decoding regime. And in that regime, the decoding problem is believed to be hard for a random instance of the problem. And with that, I mean that C is a random code, or in other words, it's a randomly sampled k-dimensional subspace. And for this, like a random instance of the decoding problem, all known algorithms run in time and memory exponential. So as I said, the most efficient generic attacks for the decoding problem are known as information set decoding algorithms. And these are all can all be viewed as improvements of Branch's algorithm, which is more than 60 years old. And more generally, any ISD algorithm can sort of be formulated using the framework by Phineas and Sandrier. So what's an ISD algorithm? So consider a decoding problem instance with a unique solution E. That means that E is a code word and it has having weight W, and we want to find it. So the high-level idea is as follows, where n prime and w prime and capital N are parameters that should be optimized, and their role will become clear soon. So the first step is to create a code C prime from C, where C prime is now an n prime k code instead of an nk code. And this sort of creates a random decoding problem instance where we look for code words of having weight W prime. So just to recall, N prime and W prime are to be optimized later. And C prime is constructed in a way that the code word in C prime uniquely lifts to a code word in C. And then our hope is the following. We hope that this problem is easier to solve and has maybe more than one solution. And then we hope that one of the solutions to the sub-instance lifts to the main solution E. And how we're going to try to find these sub-solutions, that's using an oracle A. And this finds capital N solutions to this sub-instance. And now, of course, we cannot find more solutions than there exist. So there is an upper bound on capital N defined by the parameters N prime, W prime, and K. Now, if none of the found sub-solutions yield a main solution, then we repeat. And this also immediately explains what the time complexity of this ISD algorithm is. So if P is the probability that one iteration succeeds, then 1 over P repetitions roughly suffice to find a solution with high probability. And the cost of one iteration is dominated by the cost of this oracle A. So if I denote this by T sub A, then the total cost is the runtime of A times 1 over P. And for those familiar with quantum algorithms, you may immediately think of a quantum improvement because what we can do is we can use amplitude amplification. And this allows us to, instead of repeating 1 over P many times, we only have to repeat 1 over square root P many times. And note that we can efficiently detect whether we have found a solution. So a quantum variant is the following. We use amplitude amplification, so we only repeat 1 over square root P many times. And this oracle A is now allowed to be quantum. And to denote that the runtime may be better, the runtime of this oracle, I denote this by superscript Q. Then we get the following time complexity, which is just the runtime of this possibly quantum algorithm times 1 over square root P, instead of the cost as before. Now, this is not new. There are some existing quantum ISD algorithms. In particular, the first one to observe this was Bernstein. And we will refer to his algorithm as quantum Branch, because his algorithm is essentially Branch's algorithm together with amplitude amplification. And so Branch was sort of the first and easiest ISD algorithm, but there have been more advanced classical ISD algorithms, and some of them also resulted in a quantum ISD algorithm. And this is work by Kashigar and Tillich and by Kirschenova. And their quantum ISD algorithms have improved runtime, but worse memory complexities than quantum Branch. And I highlight quantum Branch here because this will be sort of our baseline for comparison, because clearly if we want to come up with a new quantum ISD algorithm, we would like it to be better than the first quantum ISD algorithm. So I hope I gave you a bit of an idea of what ISD algorithms, how they look like, and now explain the role of code sieving in ISD. So with sieving-based ISD, I refer to ISD where the oracle A is instantiated with a sieving algorithm. And recall that this oracle A aimed to find capital N code words of weight W prime in this sub-instance code C prime. Now, the algorithm for code sieving works as follows. We start from capital N random vectors of weight W prime in our space. So these vectors do not necessarily need to be in C prime, but we'll slowly sift those vectors that are in C prime. And this sieve will be done iteratively. And in particular, what we will do is that we will, so the code words in C prime have to satisfy N prime minus K equations or code constraints. And what we will do, we will slowly add one equation at a time. So in iteration I, we start with capital N vectors of weight W prime that satisfy I minus 1 code constraints. And then the goal is to combine them to obtain capital N new vectors of weight W prime that satisfy I code constraints. And here I should emphasize that one approach we could do is that instead of combining, we just keep our initial vectors and we only keep those that satisfy also the ith code constraint. But this will lose, because that will happen with probability a half. That way we will lose half of the vectors in each iteration, and this will shrink the list size by too much. So it's really crucial to have some combination procedure here to obtain capital N new vectors. And this combination procedure is a near neighbor search procedure. And then after N prime minus K iterations, we have sort of had all the N prime minus K equations, and we end up with capital N code words in C prime of weight W prime. Now it's important to note here that this code sieving approach imposes a lower bound on the output size of this oracle A, because we want that there are capital N solutions to this combination procedure here. And this lower bound has the following form. Okay. So ISD code sieving and NS, it might be a bit confusing for those that see this for the first time. So my collaborator Simona made this beautiful text picture where we can see how these algorithms relate to each other. So recall that ISD is this like overall algorithm that tries to solve the main decoding problem. And iteratively, it tries to solve a sub-instance or like a possibly easier decoding problem by applying this sieving oracle. And the sieving oracle then repeatedly applies a near neighbor search oracle to find enough code words, which form the solutions to this sub-instance. So I hope this clarifies it a little bit. So now we can talk about quantum sieving-based ISD. So far I explained to you what classical sieving-based ISD is. Namely, it's classical ISD where the oracle is a code sieving algorithm. And this naturally gives the following quantum analog of sieving-based ISD. Namely, we use implicit amplification. In other words, we use quantum ISD, and we allow this oracle A to be quantum. And recall that ISD has these additional parameters, N prime, W prime, and capital N. And these define the problem that this oracle A has to solve. More precisely, A aims to find capital N solutions to this decoding problem with parameters N prime, K, and W prime. And then our result is the following. If we consider any N prime and W prime and capital N that satisfy the lower bound constraint on capital N, which I recall this is naturally the case for the existing code sieving algorithms, then the runtime of quantum sieving-based ISD is at least that of quantum branch. And in particular, this means that it also performs worse than the quantum state of the art for ISD. Furthermore, this is in contrast to classical sieving-based ISD because that does outperform classical branch. Okay, so more formally, I claim the following, or we claim the following. Consider a random instance of the decoding problem in the unique decoding regime. Then for any parameters that satisfy both this lower and upper bound constraint on N, there is no oracle A such that the resulting quantum ISD algorithm has a better runtime than quantum branch. And here I would like to recall that this lower bound constraint naturally appeared in the current NNS-based code sieving approaches. And this upper bound was induced by the ISD problem itself, because this oracle A cannot find more solutions than there are. So I'll sketch the proof now, because it's hopefully straightforward enough to follow. So recall that the expected runtime of quantum ISD was given by this runtime of this oracle times 1 over square root P. And P was this probability that one iteration in the ISD algorithm succeeds. Now, I won't write down the full formula for this probability P, but it is of the form capital N times some Q that is independent of capital N. On the other hand, the runtime of this oracle A is clearly lower bounded by capital N because we require it to output capital N solutions. So altogether, we get a lower bound on T of square root N divided by Q. Now, Q only depends on these parameters N prime and W prime. And capital N has this lower bound, which is also in terms of N prime and W prime. So using this lower bound on capital N, we obtain a lower bound on capital T, which is in terms of N prime and W prime alone, and also on the fixed parameters N, K, and W that are defined by the problem. Now we then numerically show that for any allowed N prime and W prime, this lower bound is always worse or like no better than the runtime of quantum branch. And here I would also like to emphasize that classically this problem does not occur, because classically we don't have this square root. I actually don't know, do you see my cursor?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. So this square root does not appear classically, so that means that this the denominator and the numerator both have a factor of n, and these cancel out. And this is not surprising because we know that classical sieving-based ISD does outperform classical branch. Okay. So we did not succeed in constructing a quantum sieving-based ISD algorithm that outperforms quantum ISD algorithms, but we tried to overcome the limitations. So recall here that the bottleneck for quantum sieving-based ISD was this lower bound on capital N, namely on this output size of this sieving subroutine. I'll now present two attempts that we had to circumvent this issue, which unfortunately failed. And in the next, I will omit constant factors because that will make the presentation a little bit easier, but I hope that does not confuse you. Okay, so the first attempt. To explain the first attempt, let's zoom in on the source of the lower bound constraint on capital N. So I told you that the sieving algorithm, what it does is in each iteration, it's given a list of vectors that satisfy some code constraints, and we use some combination procedure that turns them into new vectors that satisfy an additional code constraint. And what this algorithm does more precisely is that in each iteration, given a list of capital N vectors, it finds capital N pairs, so there are n squared pairs, and it searches among those pairs to find pairs whose sum have Hamming weight W prime. And this is precisely the near neighbor search problem that I was talking about before. Now the lower bound on capital N then comes from guaranteeing that the expected number of solution pairs is at least capital N, because we want to find capital N solutions. And note there are n squared pairs, and if I denote the probability that a random pair satisfies this Hamming weight constraint, then we want, if I denote this by P sub superscript 2, then we want that this inequality holds. So this is where the lower bound comes from. And to be more precise for the careful listener, recall I'm now not talking about the code constraints anymore, but what actually is the case, so we have the input list are capital N vectors who satisfy, say, I-1 code constraints. So clearly their sum also satisfies by linearity I-1 code constraints. And with half probability, they also satisfy the ith code constraints. So we actually want, instead of finding capital N pairs, we want to find a small constant times capital N pairs. But this if you look at this inequality, this will only affect the lower bound of capital N with a constant factor. So that's not a problem. Okay, but in any case, I hope it's clear where the lower bound on capital N comes from. So what we know from lattice sieving is that it can help to use t-tuples instead of pairs to reduce the lower bound on capital N. In lattice sieving, a similar near neighbor search problem appears, as that I highlight here. It's somewhat different, but it is of a similar form. So maybe this helps also for codes. So consider some t at least 2 and define the following t-sieving algorithm, which in each iteration, again, is given a list of capital N vectors, but now aims to find capital N tuples, whose sum has having weight W prime. And then we may get a lower bound on this output size capital N, because namely now we wanted N to the power t times some probability is at least N. And this probability is now the probability that a random t-tuple forms a solution tuple. And this hopefully results in a lower bound. However, we still obtained a somewhat negative result. In particular, if we assume that the runtime of any t-sieving algorithm is lower bounded by the optimal runtime of a 2-sieving algorithm, then for any quantum ISD algorithms with a t-sieving algorithm as Oracle A, the expected runtime is no better than that of quantum branch. So this was attempt 1. Attempt 2 is where we modify the list sizes. So more precisely, recall that this lower bound on capital N comes from maintaining the same list size throughout each iteration of the sieving subroutine. So we're given n vectors, and we want to find n new vectors for the next iteration. What if we vary the list sizes? So consider the following sieving subroutine that samples a list of capital N0 vectors of weight W prime, and this capital N0 is not defined yet. We leave it free. And then in the next iteration, what we do is we find capital Ni pairs whose sum has Hamming weight W prime. And of course, we discard those not satisfying the ith code constraint, but this we can ignore this for now. And then we let Li be the resulting list, and we repeat this for all the iterations until we have found the capital N sub N prime minus K code words. And unfortunately here as well, we failed. So what we showed is that for any possible choices of these Ni, of these list sizes, the expected runtime of quantum ISD with the above algorithm as Oracle A is no better than that of quantum branch. So to conclude, we studied a natural quantum analog of sieving-based ISD, but the resulting quantum sieving-based ISD algorithm did not yield runtime comparable to the quantum state of the art. I did mention that quantum speedups were possible for code sieving when we view it as a problem in itself, and I've not presented this here because this was not a failure. I hope that this work, or we hope that this work provides some useful insight into the limitations of sieving-based ISD, at least from a quantum perspective, and we'd like to thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Lynn, for the talk. Are there any questions? So maybe I can start. So you have 2 natural attempts to resolve them, and you probably tried that, but like, did you try to combine these 2? So you have varying list sizes, and you also don't do pairs but tuples. So like, maybe you combine 2 at the same time.
That's a good question. I did not think about that, so I have to think if I quickly see a problem there.
Otherwise, next CFAIL.
Otherwise, next
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't immediately, I'll have to think of this offline, but we did not think of it, but it would surprise me, I should say. But
Right. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so if not, then let's thank Lynn again. And now we move on to puzzle.
Okay, this is the first time we're doing this, so bear with us. We're also going to start a little bit late to accommodate a late finish from the room next door, in case they want to participate. So we're going to take about 10 or 15 minutes here to get set up. But in the meantime, this is a competition that you can do in teams of 1 to 4 people. So if you want to recruit your team while we're getting set up, and we'll get started here at about just before noon, and we'll go until 1.
So stop recording.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Okay, so let's get